last couple of weeks, we've been looking at words that come up around Christmas time. And these aren't just words. They're words that are tied to this time of year and a tradition called Advent. Advent is all about preparing for Christmas, preparing for the arrival of Jesus. We talked about hope, we talked about peace. Today, we're gonna talk about joy. Here's the thing about joy. It's not a word that's used often. And when we hear it, we often think of it as a lot of happiness. For example, happiness is when you find a $5 bill in your jacket pocket. Joy is when you find 20. Happiness is when you get an extension for your English paper. Joy is when you hear that the whole project has been canceled. This makes some sense, right? Except that's not how it works. Happiness and joy may appear to be similar, but there's more to them than just one being stronger version of the other. Happiness is a reaction. Sometimes things happen to you, to the people you love, or the circumstances that you're living in, and you react by being happy. You didn't do anything, you just feel happy because something happened that you like. For example, you have a really cool experience, or you have a prayer answered and a circumstance works out in your life, or you get some quality time with a good friend. Or maybe you received an amazing gift, or you entered into an exciting season just like Christmas. And all of those things are great, but they aren't exactly joy. Joy is different. Maybe you've heard the phrase choose joy, but let's be honest, that sounds exhausting. It makes it seem like joy is good vibes only, or acting like everything is fine even when it's not, or only focusing on the good stuff and ignoring the bad. That sounds impossible. But also, it seems totally fake. Joy is deeper than that. It's more lasting. It doesn't ignore the hard stuff in life, but it doesn't let the hard stuff determine how we feel. And I don't know about you, but that's something that I definitely want and need in my life. So how do we experience that? How do we have joy when things in life go completely differently than we thought they would? How do we not ignore the difficult stuff and find a way to make it through? Do we keep waiting for joy to happen to us? Do we give up on it? Is there a way to experience it no matter what? I think that there is. There's a place where you can choose to look where joy will always be possible. Not just around Christmas, not just when everything is happening the way we expect it to or the way we want it to, but no matter what. In the New Testament, the second part of the Bible, there's a book named Luke. Who was the author? Well, Luke. Luke's account gives us a lot of information about Jesus' birth. Luke was a Gentile, which means he wasn't Jewish, and therefore he was largely excluded from religious community. He wrote to the audience of people who were also Gentiles. So the details that are included are for a specific purpose, and he wanted his readers to know that Jesus was nothing like Roman leaders that they were used to. Luke talks about things like how Jesus and the Son of God was born in a manger instead of a palace. He told us that Jesus was born in an unmarried teenage girl and not to a rich family in a Jewish community. And in Luke 2, he tells us about how a group of shepherds, a job that would have been made dirty, unclean according to religious law, and they were like outcasts of society, but they were the first to hear about Jesus' birth. In other words, Luke wanted them to know that Jesus changed everything. He represented so much more than a famous leader. He was even better. He was a message for everyone. So Luke wrote this. So the shepherds are just kind of minding their own business in the middle of this field in the middle of the night when an angel appears. And if you've ever read about angels showing up in the Bible, they always lead with, "Don't be afraid." It makes me wonder what they looked like if afraid. was the expected response. Either way, that's what an angel says. Do not be afraid. Then the angel talks about having good news. And to the people living in the Roman Empire at the time, the phrase good news was something they would have been not so familiar with. Caesar would use this phrase to describe what they were doing as rulers of the empire. But this angel is basically like, no, I have real good news. News that will bring actual joy. It's the start of better things. What was this news? The news of that was that a Savior and Messiah was born. And again, all these words would have made people think of an early king, a ruler like Caesar. But the angel said that all this news is for all people. And the good news isn't just for Rome or for people of Rome. The good news didn't come from Rome. It came from God. It was God's good news for all people, Jewish people, non-Jewish people, people living, people who are poor and underprivileged, every single one. And Luke continues with this. The shepherds didn't just want to take the angel at his word. They wanted to experience it for themselves. Why? Because they had lived their whole lives being considered as an afterthought, as unclean or unholy, unimportant, left out and overlooked. And yet an angel chose them to hear the good news first. That was for all people. The people who were uninvited and didn't belong before were now the first group of people to learn about the good news. Joy for people like the shepherds typically wouldn't have been hard to find. But the angel said it was theirs to experience, not just because Jesus was going to be Caesar and be a new power, no matter what that power was, no matter what was happening, no matter who was calling the shots. In other words, the angels were saying, nothing around you may change, but your experience of Jesus can change everything. I can give you joy no matter how bad things are. And that means the good news for the shepherds is good news for us right now. Joy is something that we can choose today, no matter what our circumstances look like. And how do we know that? Well, let's skip ahead a bit into a passage in the book of Hebrews, which was written after Jesus had died and had been resurrected. The early church was exploding in growth. In this book, the author was talking about a group of Christians who were being persecuted for their faith. They were wondering if it was worth it to follow Jesus. And they probably didn't think joy was something that they could experience because of how bad life was going. But the writer says this. The author says, even with the dying on the cross ahead of him, Jesus was able to have joy because of what was ahead. He got through it because he knew there was something on the other side. He knew that the cross wasn't the end of the story. Jesus chose the cross, the path that would have seemed the least joy-filled, in order to show us what love looked like. And knowing that the true character and love of God would be made clear in his suffering on the cross, that gave Jesus joy. Because his dying on the cross made a way for us to be in relationship with God and experience God's love. And when we experience the love of God, it's also the key to our joy. In other words, joy shows up in unexpected places, in surprising ways. Joy is possible no matter where you are in life and no matter how difficult it is. It can be reached and experienced, and it's all because of Jesus. He models joy in the most unexpected places. He proves to us that joy has nothing to do with the things going our way or the way we want, and has nothing to do with us denying difficult things in our life. And Jesus makes it available to us too. The shepherds experienced it 2,000 years ago when the angel told them joy was possible because of good news for all people. And we can experience it today because the same good news from 2,000 years ago is still good news and great joy for us. God is with us, God is for us, and because of him, joy is possible. So now we have to activate it, and it starts with a simple phrase. Where there's no joy, bring it. Maybe the idea of finding joy right now seems impossible. And yes, it's gonna be difficult, but it's not impossible. As you think about the idea of joy in your own life, try to do a few things, like ask yourself, what would it look like to go to Jesus as a source of joy? What would it look like to try and find joy in Jesus in this season right now? Choosing joy could look like taking time to surround yourself with music, nature, or other things that help you clear your mind. Remember, this isn't the whole story. The thing that feels most difficult now may end up bringing you a sense of purpose and understanding later that you didn't think was possible. Jesus endured the cross, but the cross wasn't the whole story. There was joy knowing that the cross wouldn't be the end. It was actually the start of better things. It was terrible and miserable, but it gave us a message of what God is really like. And that brings us joy. So remember, none of us have a life where everything is perfect, but all of us have access to joy. A joy that God made possible that wasn't dependent upon anything except His goodness. Where there is not joy, let's bring it this holiday season.